Hey everybody, this is Blake here. I am going to be doing a new Kickstarter project. Pretty much, I need $4,000 or $5,000 so I can invest in a new perfect computer that I could do all of my episodes on. So no, just kidding. I'm not doing any of that. No, actually, if you may have noticed, that I do ads and stuff. Pretty much all that goes into stuff that I'm using for these video reviews. So the computer is the big one, because like this computer that I'm using right now, it's actually not mine. I'm at my mother's. I don't have one at my own house. And well, I have a computer, but it's not very good, so that's what I'm saving up for. And it's actually kind of messed up because I technically paid for most of this one, but whatever. But beyond the computer, I'm also going to do that, when like the Angry Video Game Nerd and I think the Cinema Snob, they want to sell DVDs of their movies, I'll buy using that, but I'm not going to ask for any donations or anything. I was just a joke. But I wanted to explain what I had intended to do for these next few weeks, actually more like these next few months. I wanted to do a creepy bald guy review, at least one Kickass of Awesome review, a combination between Kickass of Awesome and creepy bald guy review. What else? 2 guidelines not sucking at video reviewing episodes, a trailer for the season 4. And then all these reviews of whatever movies come out, To Boldly Flee or the Cinema Snob movie, whatever. I do reviews of those all before season 4 even began. But more than likely, that's not going to work out that way. So what I'm planning for Critiquing the Critics is I'll release the trailer where I reveal everybody whom I will cover in season 4, probably the end of this month. And then like 2 weeks after that will be the first episode, which is of We Viewer. I'm currently in the writing stage of that. But if I don't get all the other things done before then, I'm just going to break it in. So, I might do an episode of the Critiquing the Critics, then I'll do another Guidelines episode, and then another episode of Critiquing the Critics, then maybe the Creepy Bald Guy episode. We'll just see what exactly I get done with. So that's pretty much that. I figure I talk about some movies I've seen recently just to pad out this video. I watched The Human Centipede 2. I thought the first one was okay, considering it had an unworkable concept. I thought it was well made, and it made for a pretty interesting experiment. But The Human Centipede 2 was so boring. I have not been so bored out of my mind in years. I mean, I said Total Recall was pretty boring. The Human Centipede 2 was much more boring than that. It's incredibly graphic. They're much more explicit. They leave nothing to the imagination, and the gore effects are very well done. But for the most part, it's just a failed experiment. The director tries way too hard to be arty. He relies a lot on the actor, which, even though I thought the actor did good, he's not really compelling or interesting. So I was just bored out of my mind. That movie practically put me to sleep. And considering that it is a movie that should be right up my alley, you'd think that'd be perfect for me, but it wasn't, so I'd avoid that. I just watched On Deadly Ground for the first time, which is the movie that killed Steven Seagal's career. Although technically it was a few bombs after that that really killed his career. But if I had seen On Deadly Ground when it first came out, I would have hated the shit out of it. It's just as bad as what everybody says. It's very pretentious. It's very preachy. The acting isn't very good. Well, the acting is okay, I guess, but the dialogue is very bad. It's very silly and hard to take seriously, but at the same time, it was kind of fun. When you compare that to like what Seagal does these days, these days his movies are just kind of dull and flat. There's no inspiration or ambition to be anything but a dull and flat movie, whereas at least On Deadly Ground tried. It does have a lot of energy. It was obvious that Seagal cared for the project. It doesn't work out, but at the same time, I prefer that much more than what he does these days. And at least some of the actors were a lot of fun, like Michael Caine I thought was great as the villain. And I love how it's one of the very few movies where the protagonist really is kind of a psychopath, but the movie never wants to acknowledge that. Apparently, if you drill for oil and you're just a corrupt CEO, you deserve to die brutally, and it's not even like your usual where the guy attacks the good guy. and the good guy just kills him in self-defense. No, the bad guy just wants to get out of there, and Seagal just stops him and kills him, and he's killing a bunch of people that you aren't sure are evil. So that was weird, but it was enjoyable in its own right. I watched RoboCop 2. I've been watching the RoboCop movies just to get back into swing, so when the remake does come out, yes, they're remaking RoboCop. But it's been so long since I've seen any of them that I don't really remember them. But I saw the first one, and it was really good. The second one, it's not as good, even though it's technically well made. The special effects are pretty impressive, even by today's standards. I love the villain. But at the same time, it seems like the violence has become too mean-spirited, and the satire has become too goofy. It's hard to take seriously, whereas the first one blended, grisly and over-the-top violence with, its more comical satire very well. This one, it just doesn't pull it off quite as effectively, but as a whole, I thought it was a pretty good sequel. I watched Shaft in Africa. Oddly, I don't think I've ever seen the Shaft movies, maybe the first one, up until this last year. The first one isn't great, but I do think that it's charming, and it's how's the best? It's kind of raw and rough around the edges, but at the same time, it works as such. I thought it was interesting. Richard Roundtree does a great job, and I had a lot of fun with it. But I wouldn't say it was a great movie overall. But the Shaft in Africa was a lot better than I expected, because I heard that it was the weakest of the trilogy. But I personally prefer it over the second film, which I thought was just kind of a half-assed version of the first film. But Shaft in Africa, even though it takes blaxploitation to new levels of poor taste, it still turned out pretty well. I thought the action was pretty good. Richard Roundtree gives probably his best performance of all the Shaft movies, and I had a lot of fun, even though it is pretty shameless. But what else did I see? That's probably it. I'm about to watch some movie called Cyrus, which I'm not really looking forward to. It's some horror film, but it's from the After Dark Studios, and the last After Dark Studios movies I had watched was Wicked Little Things, which was very generic. It's your usual, for some reason somebody goes and they touches a door and it opens mysteriously, and for some reason they decide to walk in and investigate, then they turn around and whoever is in the house is right there behind them as if they just snuck up. I hate that kind of shit. So I have really low expectations for this one. Oh, I did watch The Gate, the 1987 movie that I actually grew up with. It's a very nostalgic horror film. It seems like everybody I know grew up with it too, so I'm not the only one who feels that way. It is pretty fun, even though it's also pretty silly. It's one of those movies that blends, genuine unease with legitimately entertaining and entertainment, and so even though it is pretty campy, it works as such. So I'd recommend you watch that. If you want to read any of my written reviews, just check the links in my description. That's pretty much all I have. So be patient with critiquing the critics. I'm much more meticulous than I used to be. I was supposed to have a Kickass of Awesome episode out today, but I just kept screwing up my lines, so that will have to wait a little bit. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys later.